and I hear the first officer call out, and then the first officer jumps on the radio and he screams, "Holy shit, it's the goat man!" And I mean, it just like everything went quiet, and I could hear the ringing in my ears, and I could feel my heart race, and so I hit my light and I went flying up there.
I've been told by some older people, elders, that you grab them and you hold them and you don't own them, but you hold them there until daylight. If you can hold them or pull them into the light, it destroys anything they have, any kind of power or anything they were trying to do to you. It'll destroy them.
This guy was like bouncing, like, you know, like how you see people kind of getting ready to jig, you know how they kind of bounce? Yeah, he was like that way. He was just kind of bouncing, and he was just kind of going back and forth on one foot to the other. And he just kind of turned sideways, and he turned back over to the other way, and he took off. Holy shit, he jumped in Wanda.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Rod Williamson, and you're listening to Lodge Tales. So Merry Christmas, everyone, and this is our Christmas episode. Well, there's going to be two of them. It was kind of long, so I'm just splitting them up into two. But this is part one. Part one, we talk about, I guess, the power of belief and things that happen around, I guess, believing in certain things. But I'd like to thank everyone for being here, showing us your support. We go into a few stories that are gonna kind of might be a little hard to swallow, might be a little out there, but I hope you enjoy them, and I hope they give you something to think about. So without any further messing around, let's get into the show. Well, welcome back, everyone. We have a returning guest who wants to remain anonymous again. And if you would, go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself before we get into the show.
As you know, and you know, of course, you know me.
Mm-hmm.
Know me for a while, and I was on your podcast back in October, and you know, we talked about some of the stuff I grew up with, and you know, growing up with a lot of different, I guess, traditional people and stuff. I got to see a lot of odd, well, I don't know if you call them odd, but just really interesting things, you know, that I think a lot of people, you know, they have questions about, you know, as far as like spirits and things like that. And I was, you know, fortunate enough, as you were, and a lot of people probably out there on our res at least, got to experience different things that didn't make a lot of sense and stuff. And for me, you know, growing up with a lot of traditional folks, I got to get a lot of their knowledge firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times that's what I go off of, and what they would explain to me about different spirits and different things that would happen that quote unquote people call paranormal, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's you know, it's interesting stuff because you know, every now and then I'll listen to different stories, and I guess the one thing that I always notice about, you know, people that have stories like this, you know, whether they're Indian or non-Indian, for Indian people, at least the ones I know, it makes total sense. You know, it's not a question of, oh, is this real or not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the non-native people, you know, they really have a hard time with that because they are told not to believe in that stuff, you know, which is weird to me. It's always been weird to me, even in the churches and stuff. You know, you're supposed to believe in a man up there that's preaching to you. about God. And, you know, since it's Christmas time, you know, I kind of think of it like that, you know, and believe in Jesus and stuff like that. But then when you bring them something like, you know, this thing's bothering around my house, and all of a sudden, oh, well, either you're crazy or, you know, we don't believe you, you know.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad when you really think about it, you know, because, you know, as far as, you know, I mean, as far as growing up, I grew up with the Catholic faith also, you know.
Yeah.
And so my mother, she really believed in, you know, Jesus and stuff like that, and the saints, and, you know, and believed in the power of prayer. And because she also believed in the Indian ways too. And a lot of people are like that. They're kind of dual, quote unquote, citizens of religion, you know, where they're maybe Catholic, but they follow also, you know, native teachings. And so for them, when those two combine, at least in my household, and I'm sure in your household too, it's like it becomes, you know, it becomes what it's supposed to be, which is spiritual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The belief system, of course, is if you pray, good things can happen. You know, but you have to, you know, you have to work hard at it, and you have to live it every day. You can't just go to church on Sunday and call it good. You know, like
Yeah.
a lot of people do. You know, they go to church and call it good, and, you know, rest of the week they treat everybody like crap and go about their ways treating people good. Not that I'm saying I'm a saint or anybody else I know is a saint, but the ones that have tried really hard to understand our ways have really flourished, if they stick with it, that is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, because you see the ones that live because it's a lifestyle, you know. You see the ones that live the life. They're always doing something for others, and they don't expect anything back, and they're always quick to help. You know, and they always have this effect on you that you're worth something, that you're loved, you know, that they care.
Oh, yeah.
This makes you feel good. Those types of people, they never go around harming things.
Nope.
or trying to hurt feelings or anything like that. They might tease you.
Yeah, which is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So
well, it's, you know, it's interesting to me because, you know, especially this time of year, you know, I was just talking with a relative of mine today, actually, about some of this. And, you know, we were talking to him about giving, you know, the spirit of giving, you know. And during this time of year, you know, people give a lot of, you know, they go to, you know, of course, to Walmart, Target, you know, wherever you're from, you know, depending on what stores you have around, and they buy stuff, right? And they put a lot of pressure on themselves to get, quote unquote, the, you know, best gift they can, you know, for, you know, relatives or their husband, their kids, all this stuff. And we were talking about that, and he wanted to get me this gift, you know. He's like, because I bought him a gift. And I said, you know, I said to him, I said, you don't have to buy me a gift. Oh, no, I want, you know, I want to do all this for you, and you're always helping me out, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, I said, well, the way that we live, and I said, because he grew up with traditional ways too, I said, you know, we give people gifts all year round as Indian people that are, you know, following teachings as well as we can because of appreciation for those people being in your life. And we don't expect nothing back, like you were just saying, you know. We go out and we try to treat everybody kind and everything. Not that we're perfect, but we show that appreciation to the people we love and care for, and even in some instances, strangers, total strangers.
Yeah.
Because we care. And I'm not trying to make us sound like we're just this perfect group of people, tribal people. But if you look at a lot of the tribal people around the world, they're like that,
Yeah.
And so then it comes back to really believing, So I have this little story since it's Christmas time, and I just thought of it, with my mother and her sisters. So years ago, they were really involved with the Catholic ways,
Mm-hmm.
but they also believed in the Indian ways. But years and years ago, my mom told me, she said her and her two sisters and her uncle and aunt took a ride out towards Two Medicine somewhere. And, this was back in the, I don't know, probably, I'm going to guess around the 60s, 50s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And they were just young. They were only like, I think she said they were just like about 12, 13 years old. And so they were out with my great uncle and my great aunt, and what they'd like to do is, he had this old truck. Back then, of course, it was new.
Mm-hmm.
But he was one of the few people that actually had a truck. And he would like to take rides, and he would always take my mom and his nieces for rides, and with him and his wife, my auntie, my great aunt. And they went out there, and it was summer night. And as they were sitting there in the back of his truck, my uncle and his wife were in the front, and they were just sitting in there visiting, and the girls were in the back. And there was one single cloud by the moon. And they were sitting there staring up at it, visiting. Pretty soon that cloud started changing. And as it started changing, it turned into a man. And she said that man then looked at, that cloud started changing some more, and that man was carrying a cross. And she said it turned into the likeliness of Jesus. Mm-hmm. For all intents and purposes of what we see as Jesus nowadays on the cross and in paintings and stuff. And he walked across that moon, in front of the moon, and they said he just walked with that cross, carrying it at a steady pace, and he vanished. And they all witnessed it. And it really put them into that belief system, she said, into the, believing in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And she said after that, they never, ever wavered in their belief. And, and that's really cool because when you think about it, your belief is really super, your belief is strong. Especially when you're younger, when you're a kid. When you're a kid, your belief is really powerful. It's you don't have that worldly, the world telling you no. The world telling you stuff like, oh, you're nuts, or, in some cases, or maybe you're, there's something wrong with you, or my favorite is, people say, mass hysteria,
Yeah.
Which is so stupid, man. I mean, I've seen mass hysteria in like a sweat lodge and stuff,
Yeah.
And can it affect people? Yeah. I won't lie there. It can affect people because if somebody, and you are a soldier,
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you're doing say, I don't know, a raid or something, or you're in a situation where it can get very volatile very quickly. And if you don't keep your ducks in a row, especially from the top, working from top to the bottom, command structure, then people lose their minds and they become crazed, and that's kind of like mass hysteria in my opinion, because if you're freaking out all at the same time, there's no reason there.
Yeah.
There's no stopping and saying to yourself, okay, let's think this through rationally and let's get through it, because that's kind of how I think, especially in our culture, that's how a lot of those old timers that did ceremonial stuff and had spirits do things, that's really the key, and I asked one spiritual leader years ago when I was a kid, if he ever got scared, because he would have these ceremonies. I won't say what, because some people don't understand what they are, but you've been to ceremonies enough that you know what those nighttime ceremonies are about.
Mm-hmm.
And you have spirits that come in and things like that. And it can get really intense really quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very intense. And I asked him, I said, hey, do you ever get scared? And he, this was after one of these kind of intense ceremonies, And he looks at me and he started laughing. He said, hell yeah. Hell yeah, I get scared. I'd be scared of the person that claims they don't get scared.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my my gauge right there. Being scared is normal, but it's what you do with that fear that's, going to help you or hinder you, Mm-hmm. Anyway, not to get off subject, but I mean, that's what it is, that belief structure, when my mother and her sisters and my uncle and aunt saw Jesus, after that she was very much, she said, and she equated that as the thing that really tied her into her spirituality, and it didn't waver. Neither of my aunts either,
Mm-hmm.
and it never wavered once in their lives. And they both all said the same story. They all told the same story. Because you're always thinking to yourself, well, maybe it was just my mom or my aunt that saw this, because that's that analytical side, I guess, of all of us, especially as the world we grow up in, where we think that maybe I better reconfirm this,
Yeah.
But especially this time of year, you have things that happen that are interesting. I think you were kind of talking about some of your story with your grandpa and them.
Yeah, like that one that I don't really tell. I've told you before, but I'll tell it for the audience here. So
yeah,
and I'll say again, this one freaks me out because I don't know really what to make of it now that I'm a little older, right?
Yeah.
So if there are any kids out there listening, just keep your belief in the things that make sense to you. If that's all I want to say here. I don't want to. I'm just saying that you kids, you're really powerful with the things that you believe and that you think. Don't let these adults bring you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are awesome. Well, anyways, so I must have been around 8 years old. I kind of mulled that around with you on the phone that one day, and I said, oh, yeah, about 8.
Yeah.
So I used to stay up and, through every Christmas, I used to try to stay up to see Santa. I really wanted to see him. I just wanted to catch a glimpse of him.
Yep.
And I don't know what I'd ever do if I did see him. But anyways, I always tried, and I never could. I'd always fall asleep. Like, I remember like the latest I could ever stay up was just a little past midnight. I used to think that word midnight was such a late time. It was like, it was almost mythic, you know?
Yeah.
I couldn't get past that very long. I'd fall asleep. Well, anyways, this happened years before this time, right? I was always trying to do that, fall asleep. It never worked. Well, again, it happened when I was about 8, and it was out at medicine at my grandpa's, and I don't remember the other details. Like, was my mom and dad sleeping in that back room, and was I with them back there, or was I sleeping by my grandpa and my grandma? I don't remember any of that. But anyways, I heard this noise come from and this was like Christmas Eve going into Christmas morning that night.
Yeah.
And I heard this noise in the living room somewhere, and I got up because I didn't know really what it was, but I knew something. It's those funniest things where you get woke up because you know you heard a sound, but you're sleeping and you don't know what made the sound, and you don't even know what the sound was. You just know it woke you up, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was. So I walk into the living room, and I remember seeing all these presents there. Like, oh yeah, you must have came, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think too much more of it. I was just kind of staring at the only light in there was the tree. All the lights on it kind of lit up and blinking and stuff. And I remember looking around at the presents, and then just then I hear the sound on the roof. Goes like that, and it goes from the north side of the roof down to the south side, and it was gone.
Yeah.
So right then and there, I get it in my mind, oh, that must be Santa and his reindeer. I went running outside off the porch, and I remember looking up. Same thing you were saying, that there was clouds by the moon, and I was looking up. And as I looked, there was this cloud that was like kind of low and to the right side of the moon, but it wasn't a thick cloud. It was kind of small, and I seen something kind of square, but it was white. But imagine something white at night, you know, it's not lit up or anything, but it was white looking, but still, like, I could see it. It was dim, but it went behind that cloud. I just caught like the tail end of it, and it went behind the cloud.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, what was that? I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I can only reason because I'm pretty young, and I can only reason, well, it must have been Santa, but why white and why square? What was that doing behind that cloud? And it didn't come out. You know, like I said, that cloud wasn't even as wide as the moon. It was just kind of blocking like the lower right part of the moon, and the moon was pretty clear. I mean, the night sky was pretty clear, and you could see the moon pretty clear, except for that one little side. Well, anyways, there wasn't a lot of clouds, and I go out further and I look up on the roof to see if I could see tracks in the snow on the roof, but there was nothing. Like, I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
There's a night light out there, an outside light, so you can see the roof, and you could definitely tell if, you know, there were tracks up there, because it would leave indentions. You'd basically see shadows of where they were at, you know. It would stick out. But I didn't see nothing, so I didn't tell you this, but I kind of got scared, so I ran back in. You know, you're outside at night. It was about 3 a.m. And I ran back in. Wait a minute, what am I doing outside? I ran back in. Anyways, I get back in. I look at those presents, and I try to go back to sleep. And I had a hard time because I was excited to see those presents. I didn't know what happened just then. But I go back to sleep. And the next day, well, we have Christmas. But now that I'm an adult, I think back on that time, and I wonder what was that?
What that was.
Yeah, what made that sound? Because I heard that sound, and I wasn't dreaming. I don't sleepwalk or nothing like that.
Yeah.
I was awake, you know, and I seen that, and and I heard that. So, you know, I still to this day, a lot of things go through my mind of what that was, and I have no answers. I really don't know what that was, because I've never seen a UFO that I know of. You know, I mean, I look up at the sky. It's not like I don't. I look up, and I've never seen one my whole life. People talk about him, people close to me and my family, my
Yeah.
immediate family even, and
Yeah.
I just haven't seen one, and I don't know why. But anyways,
Mhm.
I don't know what that was. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, and as we were talking about it too, that one day, my theory is, belief is really powerful. Just like I was saying, earlier about my mom and I'm seeing Jesus, and they saw him as a depiction of what we see as Jesus, right? We've been seeing all our lives the long hair, the beard, even though now as we get into the newer age and stuff, we know that where he was from and stuff like that, they were dark-skinned and most likely, because they were from African nations, basically, Egyptian, things like that. So the depiction of Jesus is probably not a proper depiction, that is. But your belief is powerful, and I always think that, like when you're a kid, things like that, like what you saw, how do we not know it was something Santa related? St. Nicholas was what they all named Santa Claus after, St. Nicholas, and he was well known for making toys for kids and in his village and taking them around on Christmas Eve. At least that was the story I got, and I want to say that you can look it up and find the whole history of St. Nicholas. And so that spirit is there. And especially this time of year, we have a very strong belief in it. As adults, maybe not as strong, but kids, they, their belief system is stronger than ours as we get older. Again, that comes down to that, the world telling us, no, that can't be real, ghosts aren't real, spirits aren't real, your emotions aren't real,
Yeah.
Which is really stupid when you really think about it, because I think to myself, if everybody on our earth all prayed about the same thing, what would happen? Like, what would happen? I mean, would there be some kind of cosmic energy or spiritual energy or something that would cause something to happen? Would we ascend to something different? Because tribes, especially most Indian tribes, and I'm sure other tribes around the world, were about being closer to our Creator. And that's really something I think people are lacking nowadays. So I think whatever it is you saw was, like I said before, maybe that spirit or whatever that thing is out there was trying to give you a happy memory.
Yeah,
If that
maybe.
makes sense. Because at the time you believed it was Santa Claus, right?
Yeah, I didn't know what else to think. I really didn't.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how I look at it, is that your belief, and then you think all those kids, because there's all these kids in the world with that strong belief, I think that for all intents and purposes, it was. I mean, that's just how I look at it. Call me crazy, which I'm sure people will, but
Yeah.
it's like your belief is really powerful. And, I think, does that make sense to you?
It does. I mean, in more ways, and it also validates other things, like, so I told you about this too, and I found this family found me, and they needed help with their house. They were being haunted in there pretty bad, and they had a a boy with disabilities, right? And
Yeah.
well, I ain't gonna talk about the whole thing of that. I mean, I told you everything, but I don't think I'll share that with the rest of the people. Just
No,
anyways,
I get it.
what it was going through and basically cleansing their house, cleansing them, and kind of like facing off with these things that are in there.
Yeah.
With the tools you're given, they're the tools that, you know, Napi Natusi gives you, you know, to use. And you're not the, you know, the power's not in you. You're just like the tool, and he's the, you know, the architect of it all. But within that, you can't go in there and just doubt everything. You know, you don't go in there saying, "Oh, this ain't gonna work. I don't even know why I'm trying." it's not, you know, you've got your. With me, how I believe that, you know, nothing can harm me. I really, honestly, I don't want to sound like arrogant or foolhardy or anything like that, or crazy brave or anything like that, but I know nothing can harm me when I have those things with me. You know, nothing bad.
Oh, yeah.
It just can't. They can't get to you. They can't harm you. So that's, I guess, the belief in that power is what protects me when I you know, have to go do something like that. You know, and the only reason I felt like I should go, and I spoke with it about my wife, like I was telling you, was because they had that boy with disabilities, right? And I have a son with disabilities, and I couldn't imagine going through something like that and not knowing what to do. Because, you know, those people were non-native, and they had no idea. They were about to sell their house and all that, and just move on. And I don't know, I really felt kind of bad, and I felt like, well, I better try and help somehow, you know. So, and I just did what you know, how we normally cleanse and everything. I just did all that and put up barriers for them and stuff, you know. So, I mean, but I don't want to go into detail of what I experienced there, but
yeah. Well, it's like it always you just remind me of a movie, one of my favorite movies, and as a kid, which was that Fright Night, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a part in there where I believe his name's I can't think of Rodney McDowell. He was in like Planet of the Apes and all this other stuff, but he plays this vampire hunter. And so they get this vampire cornered, like the head vampire, and he pulls out this cross out of his bag of, you know, steaks and holy water and stuff like that. And he holds that cross up to that vampire, and the vampire like feigns backwards and starts hissing like most vampire movies. But then he starts laughing, and he looks at that Rodney McDowell's character, and he tells him, he grabs that cross out of his hand, and he goes, "You have to have belief." You know, and that Rodney McDowell runs off because he's so scared. But of course, later in the film, he, you know, gets belief. Then that cross works on him. So it's like what you're saying, you know, like with some, it comes down with that belief, you know. You know, and since it's kind of Christmas, I gotta tell you this story because it comes from toys. So I got a couple, but I'm gonna tell you one that was really, since we're talking about something, you know, like with you seeing that spirit go behind that cloud and stuff like that. When you're a kid, these things happen to you, and as you get older, you don't really, you think that you made it up, right? Sometimes, you know, at least for me, I think back to some of the, and we've talked on length on some things. I haven't told you everything, of course, because if I did, it'd be kind of a long show. But my sister had she would collect dolls.
Yeah.
And that was her whole big thing was she always had like porcelain dolls or Cabbage Patch Kids, all these things. But when she was a little girl, this woman made her a doll. And it was a Raggedy Ann doll. But it was African American.
Mm-hmm.
They had a derogatory name they called those dolls, but they were Raggedy Ann dolls.
Hmm.
This lady made it for her. I want to say, and I'd have to ask one of my relatives, but I want to say that lady lived out like in. My dad traveled around a lot to his relatives that lived in like Oregon and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because back in I believe the 50s and 60s, they had this Indian Relocation Act. Basically, get them off the res so we can, quote unquote, assimilate them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd give you money and they could move off the res and would help you buy houses, blah blah blah. Didn't really work out, you know. We're still on the res.
Yeah.
But so she got this doll from this lady that really liked her, and this doll, just a typical looking Raggedy Ann doll, but it had something in it. What it would do is it would chase me and my brother, and I know it sounds crazy as shit. Excuse my language, but crazy. My sister would put it down the hallway because her bedroom was a little further, closer to the living room than my mom's. And when she would watch us, she wouldn't, you know, she didn't like us playing in those back rooms because she always, you know, we'd always dig around and stuff. You know how kids are.
Yeah.
And she would keep us out of that bedroom, out of her bedroom, so she would put that doll at the end of the hallway. And when we would get close to it, it would grab us, dude.
Whoa.
Literally grab us, or it would chase us. And it just gives me shivers. You know, you've seen the Annabelle, the true Annabelle doll.
Mm-hmm.
Well, picture African American Raggedy Ann one. And it would chase us up and down that hallway. And we'd get to a certain point, it would let go. We'd scream and cry, man. I mean, we literally would. And we were only like 7, 8 years old. It was probably about a year after my dad died. And so when she would put that doll down there, we wouldn't go down that hallway. Okay, so flash forward about 20, 30 years. Yeah, about 30 years. My brother at the time, we were riding together, and he asked me if I could give him a ride down to the casino.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, sure. So, and you know, when me and my brother, you know, you knew how we were, you know, sometimes we were really good together and sometimes we weren't. You know, we're kind of like oil and water, you know.
Yeah.
And, but when we got along good, and we talked about all kinds of stuff, you know. And so we're driving him down and just trying to drive him a little bit. And for whatever reason, he looks at me, he goes, hey, do you remember that doll, you know, our sister had when we were kids? And I said, yeah.
Hmm.
And he goes, do you remember when it would grab us and chase us and stuff? And I just got these shivers up my back, and I told him, I thought I made that up in my head all these years. And he said, no, it was real. He said, I remember it. He said, why would we remember the same thing? And I was just like, oh, God. and I only told a few people. There was only a few people I told that story to. But whatever was in that, whatever that, you know, spirit that lived in that was, I don't know if it was malicious or bad or anything like that as I look back at it. But it knew what it was doing, you know? it kept us out of the back rooms. And maybe that, that was the whole point, because things like that happen to you, especially when you're a kid, you're not, I'm not saying that, I don't know, your belief is strong, and those spirits are more, I think they're more open to showing themselves to you.
Mm-hmm.
They're more open to doing things, and making you more aware of their presence. And my mom, you remember cakewalks?
No.
Toys. They used to have them in like Hart Butte and Brown, and what you would do is, it was like a little fair, like a little carnival kind of atmosphere,
Uh-huh.
and it was called Cakewalk, right? So they had all these little stations. I don't know if you remember it. Maybe you were.
No.
Maybe they stopped doing it when because you're not that much younger than me. But what you would do is, it was like a school activity, and your parents would take you, and you got candy bags, and they usually had them around this time of year, actually around Christmas and Halloween.
Hmm.
And so there was this little station with like usually a curtain or or a shower curtain or something, but they'd give you all these little plastic fishing rods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would tie like a fake worm on them, and you would throw them over that curtain, like you were fishing. It was a cute little idea.
Hmm.
And you throw it over, and the person on the other side, they would tie things to it, like toys or candy, and then they would pull the line to make it like you were fishing, like you just caught, you bagged something.
Yeah.
And you would pull it back over, and there usually was a prize, and they call them cakewalk. And so me and my brother went to one out in Hart Butte, and we threw our little rods over, and they pulled on them. I still remember they pulled on them, and we pulled them up, and we had these little bendable figurines, and they were like a wolfman, a mummy, and I want to say like a scarecrow.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, in her bedroom, she had she had a police scanner and a CB radio. And so that night that we got them, we played with them and everything, and you could bend them in different poses and blah blah blah. And we put them in my mom's bedroom on her little police scanner, and we bent them so they were sitting on her police scanner, like facing her.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, if you knew my mom, she prayed every night. And so she was laying in bed and she was praying. She was looking at those, she turned and she was looking at those little figurines on her little police scanner, and she's like, and my mom was my mom, she looked down and she's like, I don't like looking at those things, they look creepy. So she turned them around so they were facing the other way. Because, for her, they were just toys,
Yeah.
But she didn't like how they looked. So she turned them the other way. And she closed her eyes again, and she prayed and kept praying. And she opened her eyes, and she looked over. And they were facing her again.
Oh.
So she yelled for my sister. My sister came back there and said, what do you need, Mom? Just take these things in there. She said, why is that? And so she told her what they did. So my sister come walking in there, and she cut them all up and threw them away. They had they were little bendable figures, basically wire with a mold on top of them that, made them look like, whatever you decided to do, like, with these ones it was the Wolfman and the Mummy, and I want to say, like I said, it was a Scarecrow or a Pumpkin
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so my sister came into the kitchen. That's where we were. Now that I think about it, we were in the kitchen with my sister. My mom went to bed early all the time, and she just cut them up and threw them in the trash.
Oh.
But anyway, like I said, so I'm not trying to scare people out there either, kids especially, about toys.
Yeah.
But it just, like I said, that belief and whatever that was with my mom, especially the house I grew up in, it was just on par for that place. And I often wonder what happened to that doll. I never did have the chance to ask my sister what she did with it. I want to say she kept it, and then it got lost to, time somewhere. And, but the other thing too, yeah, and you asked me this earlier, and I'll tell you this story too, because you asked, and I don't know if you have any other ones, but, again, it's that belief system, with my father, he was a World War II veteran, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So with most tribes and a lot of tribal people, voodoo people have voodoo dolls, right?
Yeah.
You have down south with the southern tribes, you have Kachinas. You have these little, as you go further south, they have these little tiny figurines. I don't know if you've ever seen them from way down, like Pueblo and further down. They're little tiny, must look like matchsticks.
Huh.
But they're dressed. Have you ever seen those?
No, I don't think so.
Well, their their belief is that those are little spirits, right?
Yeah.
And you have these little spirits, and you take care of them as like a family. So they usually come with like my understanding, and I could be totally off the mark here, but my understanding was they made these little tiny dolls too, these little tiny figurines, and they dress them up as a particular family, and that's how you protected your family. You took care of those little dolls,
Mm-hmm.
and it represented the people in your family. That's how their medicine people work. And up this way, as you get into northern tribes and stuff like that, people don't talk about those dolls because people don't associate us with things like that.
Yeah.
But they do exist in our tribes. They're just not very common anymore. Like the Cree, they have a version of it. I'm sure the Crow do too, and maybe Cheyenne and Arapaho and all these different tribes. But with my family, my father, when he was 18, 17 years old, he came from a family that really, at least at the time, really practiced their ways,
Mm-hmm.
And so before he went to war, because World War II was coming and they knew it was coming, so they had a ceremony of some kind, and they made this doll of a little sailor, just like a Navy sailor. And they gave it to him, and they said to him, you take this with you to war. Keep it with you, and it will keep you safe. So he said, okay. He's 17, 18, when you're that age, you don't think much of it,
Yeah.
And he headed out, went to boot camp, blah, blah, blah. Next thing he's on an aircraft carrier. And I want to say the South Pacific, and his was one of the ones that got destroyed. I don't know what it was. This is just the story he told my mom, and my mom told me. So he worked on airplanes. And he was in a cockpit when this happened, but they got hit with a torpedo or something, and they start sinking. And as they were sinking, he was trying to get out of this airplane. But it happened so fast that he basically started going down with the ship. And he was inside this cockpit, and he could not get out. And he said that it was like, the pressure from the water, because it happened so quick, pressure from the water was basically keeping him trapped inside it. And as he was going down, he said it was starting to get darker. And I just can't even imagine that feeling of, darkness coming around you as you're sinking, And somehow he got that cockpit to pop open. And when he popped it open, the pressure from him being down there just shot him almost clean to the top of the surface. And he starts swimming. There was a destroyer nearby that was scooping up people that were in the water. And what would happen is these Japanese Zeros would fly by, and they would strafe the water with 30 calibers. And he said, when they would come by, people would yell, "They're coming back," and they'd all dive. And they would strafe the water, and and you were a soldier, so you know exactly how that sounds. He said we'd come up, and there'd be people dead around him, blood everywhere, and they're swimming for this destroyer. And as they're getting closer, another one came by, and it strafed the water. He dove down again, and when he came back up, he was, of course, swimming. When he come back up, his arm was hanging off his side.
Mm-hmm.
One of the bullets had basically severed it off, almost. It was just hanging by muscle. And so they got onto the destroyer, and of course, in those days, when you were that kind of mangled, I guess is the best word, they just cut it off and call it good. There wasn't much because they had to patch up what they could to get you back out there fighting, or call it a loss.
Yeah.
So it was just by chance, if you want to believe in chance, the doctor on there who was trying to patch these people up recognized my father. And I guess they were good friends. And that's the one thing about my family, from being around my brother. We're pretty friendly folks, we make friends with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Or try to, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We always get along with everyone. Anyway, so his arm's hanging off, and they look at him, and they say, "Oh, I recognize this. I know who this is." And he said his name, and he said, "I'm going to reattach your arm." Well, and if it takes, it takes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Well, it took. And so after he got patched up, he got, I believe, he got honorably discharged. I don't know if we're at, but he, served his time. And he came back, and when he got back home, his relatives kept calling him. They kept saying, "You need to come over and see us." And he could just shrug it off, because you're young. Shrug it off and keep doing his thing. Finally, they said, "You need to come down and see us. It's really important." So he finally got up the notion. He went down there and got to the relative's house, and they said, "We got something for you." He's like, "Okay, you guys been bothering me so much. What is it?" They went in their house, and they brought that doll out.
Mm-hmm.
That doll was supposed to be on the bottom of the ocean
Oh.
in the South Pacific, I believe. I'm not a historian, so I could be wrong, but I know that's what happened to him. And it freaked him out big time, because he was young, just like us at the time, and it was dressed like a little sailor. They said it arrived before you got back. It showed up at our doorstep.
Oh.
And he said, because it just makes me have shivers too, He said, "Well, it served me well." And he said, "Can you?" And it scared him. He said, "Can you take it and put it out?" And you know what put out means.
Yeah.
Oh, as far as I know, they took it and put it out. But he really believed that saved his life. That doll protected him through that ordeal, because World War II was not, any war is nothing to sneeze at, but that one in particular was a tough one. So I want to say that, that's kind of my Toy Story.
Jeez. That's pretty powerful,
Hmm.
those gifts that sometimes, people give you, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Well, and it's about the intent, I believe, because, well, when you think about it, like the intent that my sister had her doll,
Mhm.
what was that intent for? It never per se tried to harm us. Like, we didn't wake up like, the TV show Poltergeist and trying to strangle us under the bed,
Mhm.
We never had any kind of issue like that, but it kept us from going in the back room. And I don't know.
Did it ever make noise? Or would just chase you guys and grab you? It never, made a sound or anything?
It didn't make any sound, if I remember right. I didn't hear like growling or making any like high-pitched sounds.
Yeah.
Shit. Again, excuse my language, but oh man, it still scares me. I'm a grown man,
Yeah.
And if I was to see it again, I don't know how I would react. Because, but to be honest, it reminds me of my sister too,
Mhm.
and she loved that thing. I'm not kidding. She loved it, and it was like one of her prized possessions. And I don't know what to think of it now. I don't think of it as in my mind, I don't think of it as like evil or anything like that. But that's age, that's hindsight, looking back and trying to make sense of certain things. Just like, with the thing you saw, going back to that for a second, it's all about belief. But it also reminds me of a story, and because I kind of like to think of everything like this. That old story about God sending a helicopter?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever hear that? Yeah, you heard that, where the guy's like going to drown and these, a dam bursts or it's a rainstorm or something, and the police show up at his house and they say, you need to leave, the flood waters are coming, you need to evacuate. And he's like, no. Me and God have a deal. Pretty soon, the water's starting to rise, and he's slowly trying to get up on top of his house, and these guys in a boat come and they say, you need to hop in with us or you're going to die. He goes, oh, no, me and God have a deal. Pretty soon he's on the tip of his house, and this helicopter comes flying up, and they're like, grab onto the ladder, you're going to die. And he tells them, no, me and God have a deal. Next thing, the waters come high enough and they drown him. He goes to heaven and he's standing in front of God, and he goes, I thought me and you had a deal. And God says, yeah, I sent the boat, I sent the police, and I sent the helicopter. And that's kind of how I look at all of it, because it's good to have belief and faith and blah, 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 but you have to be reasonable and understand what it is you're doing too, and you have to be able to correlate to. Sometimes a sound's just a sound,
Mhm.
Sometimes a bang's just a bang, but if you believe that this can help you, then it's going to help you. And that's, 99% of everything. If you go into it already, like you were saying about helping people, like when you help those folks, you know that your belief is your power.
Mhm.
and you're part of that power. You're part of, that tool. You're part of you're that. It sounds funny. You're that tool.
I'm a tool.
You're a tool. No, but I mean, you're part of that gear and cog system.
Yeah.
You're pulling along, and helping people like that is really super important. Because it's easy to shrug people off and say, "Oh, you don't believe nothing. You don't, that you were half asleep,
Mm-hmm.
Or especially kids. When you're kids, when I was growing up, most adults, a lot of them are gone now, but they were medicine people. Not all of them, but a lot of them. They all had they all had the same kind of belief system, even though, at the time it was frowned upon to be Indian. And they lived through that. They still had that belief system. And so if I went in and I told my mom, I remember seeing this man behind some lodge poles that used to have my dad's sweat in there. And he kept popping in and out. And we could see him, the old man. And it scared us. And it was broad daylight. And I told my mom. And she went right down there and she prayed. And she told him, just don't be scaring my boys. Never happened again. But she didn't say, oh, you guys are just making it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway.
These stories that we shared we don't share them with a lot of people, some of these stories, and it's fun to do it with you all, and to share these finally with a lot of people. We're very hesitant to share a lot of these things, and I mean, you can see why, right? So again, I'd like to thank the patrons, the listeners, everybody for sharing this podcast where you can. And part 2 is coming up next year, so stay tuned for that. And again, happy holidays, everyone. And let's get into the next episode.